A meeting at a church fete in South Liverpool changed popular music forever. It was July 6, 1957, and a 15-year-old Paul McCartney was invited to the event at St. Peter's Church in Woolton by his school friend Ivan Vaughan. Ivan's friend John Lennon's skiffle band, the Quarrymen, made up of his friends from Quarrybank High School, were playing a gig at the fete, and he thought Paul might be interested. John, 16, was the leader of a band made up of Colin Hanton on drums, Rod Davis on banjo, Pete Shotton on washboard, Eric Griffiths on guitar, and Len Gary on T-chest bass. Paul was introduced to the band by Ivan after their performance, and they had a few beers. He impressed them with his left-handed guitar playing and ability to tune the instrument. John was also excited by the fact that Paul knew all of the words of Eddie Cochran's 20 Flight Rock. It was clear he should join the band. About that, in his book, The Rough Guide to the Beatles, Chris Ingham wrote, "While John was aware that this talented youngster, who could also play a bit of piano and, when the Saints come marching in on trumpet, was an obvious threat to his leadership, he was also convinced McCartney could strengthen the group." Paul also had an advocate in Eric Griffiths, who enthused to John. "Paul's so good. He'll contribute a lot to the group. We need him with us." 2 weeks later, Pete Shotton bumped into Paul whilst out riding his bike and, as all had agreed, invited McCartney to join the Quarrymen. Paul accepted. A year later, Paul's friend George Harrison joined the band, and John's school friends left in 1959. 1960 saw Stuart Sutcliffe, who left in 1961 and died in 1962. Pete Best joined the band, the same year that they became the Beatles, after a couple of name changes. Their style had changed from skiffle to rock and roll, and then manager Alan Williams booked them a residency in Hamburg. The band became famous in Liverpool, thanks to gigs at the Cavern Club and Hamburg, catching the attention of Brian Epstein, who became their manager. About the band in the early years, Brian recalled, "I immediately liked what I heard. They were fresh, and they were honest, and they had what I thought was a sort of presence, star quality." Under Brian's management, Ringo Starr replaced Pete as the drummer, and the Beatles began the road to stardom. By 1963, they had their first official UK #1 with From Me to You. A year later, they arrived with a bang in America and became the biggest stars on the planet. John and Paul had come a long way from their Woolton meeting. Their songwriting partnership was the driving creative force behind the Beatles' success as they redefined popular music throughout the 1960s. John spoke about that process with Playboy in a 1980 interview, saying, "Paul provided a lightness, an optimism, while I would always go for the sadness, the discords, the bluesy notes. There was a period when I thought I didn't write melodies, that Paul wrote those, and I just wrote straight, shouting rock and roll. But of course, when I think of some of my own songs, In My Life, or some of the early stuff, This Boy, I was writing melody with the best of them." Who knows how music would sound if Ivan had not invited Paul to Woolton on that summer's day in 1957.